This week summed up the Pittsburgh Penguins season in a nutshell, and Pat and I are going to recap this loss against the Ducks, plus get you all set for the game against the Kraken on Saturday right after this.
You're Locked On Penguins, your daily podcast on the Pittsburgh Penguins, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome back to another episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes. You can follow me on Twitter at Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. You can follow him on all social media platforms at Syndrome for Wet, and you can follow the show's Twitter at LO_Penguins. Of course, thank you all so much for making this your first listen/watch of the day. We are free and available on all platforms. And finally, today's episode is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. So, Pat, if Monday was Jekyll for the Penguins, Thursday night was Hyde, because Penguins, you saw the blueprint in place for how they need to win games on a more consistent basis. They beat the Kings pretty convincingly on Monday, just blew them out, were great in the offensive zone, great in the neutral zone. They defended really hard. They got the goaltending. They won that special teams battle. And then they threw all that out the window in this loss against the Ducks. This Ducks loss shows everything you need to do in order to lose games on a more consistent basis. They have just not been able to be consistent really at all this season, outside of a really nice 3 to 4 week stretch from the end of November through basically all of December. Other than that, this is who the Penguins have been all year. They'll get a really nice win and they'll follow it up with a dud. And that's exactly what Thursday night was against the Ducks. I felt the Penguins came out like a house on fire in this game. They were out shooting the Ducks 7-0 through the first 8 to 9 minutes. But after that, Pat, they kind of just stopped playing, to be honest. Like, yeah, they got some chances, but everything they were doing right in the first 8 to 9 minutes went completely out the window. John Gibson, Anaheim's goalie, was outstanding last night, had a nice little throwback to 2014 with some of those saves. But as Michel Therrien once said, am I going to be happy to play 8 minutes? No, I'm not going to be happy to play 8 minutes. Sorry. That's my best Michel Therrien impression. I had to say it because it's relevant for today's show with how the Penguins played last night. But that was a piss poor effort for 50-ish minutes in that game. You cannot follow up that Kings win with an absolute dud like that.
It was bad. And I'll start there. So I'm going to go with this. And when I went to bed last night after the game, I was definitely frustrated, looked at that game, looked at the results, saw everything that happened, and was incredibly unhappy with what the Penguins put forth. And then I watched back some of the game this morning. If you're keeping score at home, yes, I don't sleep very much, but that's neither here nor there. The thing that I kind of picked on this morning when I rewatched some of the game is I don't want to underplay this, but I also don't want to overstate it as well. This wasn't necessarily a bad game by the Penguins, because you talked about they started off really well. And I texted you last night during the game and said, I got that creeping feeling after that great start and went, if they don't score here, they might lose. And look what happened. And part of it is, one, you don't score early. You don't take advantage of a chance that you get. But that also, in a way, I think defines how that game went last night. Anaheim capitalized on their chances. The Penguins didn't, because they had a lot of good looks. They had a lot of sustained pressure. And whether it was not getting enough chances, enough grade A chances, or John Gibson turning the clock back, the Penguins didn't take advantage of the opportunities they got, save for the power play where Michael Bunting scored a very crisp goal. But at the same time, they were not great defensively. Alex Nedeljkovic, while he wasn't bad, he had some sloppy moments, appeared to be fighting the puck a lot last night. So it really was a microcosm of the last 2 seasons for the Pittsburgh Penguins, where they don't play particularly horribly, but there are just little things within the game that end up coming back to haunt them, whether it's not taking advantage of their opportunities or a fast start, letting the only opportunities their opponent get end up in the back of their net, and then overall just not being able to sustain 60 minutes of play. So I look at last night's game and it's a bad loss. Let's not pretend like it wasn't. That's a bad loss. But you also watch the entirety of the game and then analyze it and think it wasn't like they went out there and just threw a complete dud, but they also did not play to the level they had shown us just a few days prior.
Right. And the thing that really, I guess, is bonkers is that the Ducks, they're the lowest scoring team in the league, Pat. They average 2.36 goals per game. You can't be giving up 4 goals plus the empty netter to make it 5 to a team that really can't score to save their lives. Like, we all know the Penguins aren't good defensively. The goaltending has been pretty inconsistent throughout the year, but you can't be going blow for blow with chances with a Ducks team that doesn't have a lot of high-end talent, struggles to score. That's not good enough. Like, especially after the way you generated and the way you were able to finish chances against a very stingy Kings team. Yes, the Kings really didn't get good goaltending in that game. The Ducks got really good goaltending from John Gibson, and we'll touch on him in just a second. But I just didn't like the way the Penguins were generating for a good chunk of that game. They started out doing it a bit early. There were times in the second period, but they still didn't generate to the level that I thought they could against one of the worst defensive teams in the league. I even said heading into this game, the Ducks have given up the most high-danger chances in the league at 5-on-5. Pat, the Penguins only had 6 high-danger chances last night at 5-on-5 against the Ducks. That's also not good enough. I mean, again, you generated more as a whole at 5-on-5 against the Kings than you did against the Ducks. So, again, it just goes back to the consistency issues with the Penguins and that. And I will say this, shout out to John Gibson for the way he played. He has not been particularly good these last few years. He's played on some really bad Ducks teams. He is at least playing his way into potentially being traded at the deadline. He's played at a really high level this year. I can see a team like Carolina going after him. I knew that game was over, Pat, when he made the save on Erik Karlsson. I'm like, nope, he's not allowing a goal the rest of this night. And sure enough, he didn't. But once he made that save on a shot that goes in 99 out of 100 times, I knew it was over.
Yeah, Johnny Whitehall had himself a night last night. He played extremely well. You referenced that save on Erik Karlsson, but there were a lot of opportunities. And this is how you know that it was a throwback night for Gibson. There were a lot of great, and I know that the analytics tell us the Penguins only got 6 high danger chances, but they had a lot of moments where they were pressing really hard, and he was making what should have been 10 bell saves look routine. And that is how you know it was a John Gibson throwback, because he made so many saves where you look at it and go, man, 99 times out of 100 that goes in. And I'm not just talking about the Karlsson goal. There were moments in all 3 periods where the Penguins had time of possession in the Ducks zone for 45, 60 plus seconds, and they were getting looks, they were getting chances, and Gibson was just shutting it down. Again, doesn't excuse the Penguins' lack of effort and lack of structure in the defensive zone. It doesn't excuse the fact that on the other end of the ice, Alex Nedeljkovic was fighting the puck. But as I always say on this podcast, yes, this is a focus on the Pittsburgh Penguins. Yes, we are going to pick apart the Pittsburgh Penguins, but there are 2 teams playing the game, and you have to tip your cap to how both John Gibson played and how opportunistic the Ducks were last night, because they deserve credit. This isn't a situation where the Pittsburgh Penguins have never been beaten. They've only beaten themselves. The Ducks played a good game last night, and you have to acknowledge that if we're going to be honest here.
Yeah, they woke up at around the midway point of the first period. They outplayed the Penguins for, I would say, most of those last 50 minutes with the way they're able to generate, the way that they were kind of able to push the Penguins around, the way that they were able to defend in their own zone. They defended a lot better than I thought they would, considering how usually the Penguins generate offense, not even just this year, but in recent years as well. I also will say this before we head to break, Pat. P.O. Joseph last night, horrendous game. I think that's the worst game I've seen him play in, especially this season, but probably going back to last season sometime. He was out to lunch on a lot of those goals. He got cooked by Alex Killorn especially. Took another penalty. Really, really bad night from him. By far his worst game this season as a member of the Penguins. Also, I will say this. The second thing that really made me know that this game was over, that weird bounce to make it 3-1, goes off the stanchion. For those that will remember this goal, it low-key reminded me of Kevin Bieksa's overtime winner for the Vancouver Canucks in 2011 against the San Jose Sharks. Do you remember that goal, Pat, where goes off the weird stanchion, comes back to Bieksa. He's the only one that knows where it is, fires it past the Sharks goalie, and everyone on the ice is like, wait, where the heck did that go? It was low-key almost the same thing. That was the one goal that really popped into my head when I saw that third goal go in for the Ducks last night. But really weird bounce. I also knew it was over right then too, but just wanted to add that.
This was a culmination of a rough stretch for P.O. Joseph. If you look at the way he's played over the last couple weeks, he has not been very good. It was the fourth straight game where he's taken a minor penalty, and it's the fifth out of the last six that he's taken a minor penalty. Now, on the surface, that's very concerning. But when you actually dig into it, there are a couple penalties where he's preventing a scoring chance, and you'll take that penalty as a defenseman. But at the same time, there's also quite a few examples of him not being in position, him compensating for that and compensating for getting beaten. And it's just been a really rough stretch for him. And I think the potential is still there. I think he still has room to grow, but the last 2-ish weeks have not been the best we've ever seen from POJ.
He was playing, I thought, fairly well when he came back for those first 2-3 weeks, but lately his game just hasn't been at that same level. And I know he has the ability to get back to the level that we saw him play at when he first got traded back here and at the end of last season. I felt like that was some of the finest hockey he's played as a member of the Penguins, but he just has to be, again, a bit more consistent, kind of like the rest of the team, honestly. But I think that'll do it for this first segment. Coming up in the second segment, we're going to discuss the Brian Rust injury, plus how the power play at least continue to stay hot in this game against the Ducks. But first, we got to tell you about our first sponsor, and that is Game Time. I love going to live events, whether it's sports, music, theater, or comedy. One of my favorite memories was attending a concert last year, Green Day and Smashing Pumpkins at PNC Park. The energy and excitement were unforgettable. Now, Game Time has made it even easier to get tickets for your favorite events with their new feature called Game Time Picks. This feature filters out the fluff to show you only incredible deals on great seats, so you don't even have to waste time searching through thousands of tickets. Recently, I was looking for tickets to Metallica at Lane Stadium at Virginia Tech using the Game Time app, and with Game Time Picks, I found amazing deals. I could even see the view from my seat before buying. By the way, that's going to be an awesome concert this year. Metallica and Pantera coming to Lane Stadium at Virginia Tech. Enter Sandman. Going to be one heck of a time. But the super deal was particularly impressive, offering great seats at unbeatable prices. Plus, the app's all-in pricing shows the total upfront with no surprise fees at checkout. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNHL for $20 off. Download Game Time today. What time is it? It's game time. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Damp. So, Pat, Brian Rust gets injured last night, doesn't return to the bench for part of the game, then does not return to the game at all. Mike Sullivan said he's dealing with an injury. It looks like it happened during that big hit on Radko Gudas. And no, people, I don't think that hit's going to be worthy of a suspension. I don't even think he's going to get fined for it. However, I don't like those type of collisions, man. I don't like those little knee-on-knee hits along the boards. They don't do anything for me. It just causes nothing but injuries, in my opinion. And I don't think Gudas is being a dirty player for that hit. He's just trying to finish his check. But I just don't like that type of hit. And I just really hope that injury is not too serious, considering how Rust has played, especially offensively this year. It would stink to lose him.
It really would. I will say about the hit, you're right. It's just unfortunate. He's trying to finish his hit. He miscalculates it. I don't think there was any maliciousness there. I know Gudas does have a history and he does have a reputation, but you don't need to look at every hit a player like that does and call it immediately dirty and call it malicious. Sometimes there is just an unfortunate collision, and that's how I look at that hit. As for Rust, I don't have any sources on this. I don't have any reporting on it. It's just kind of going off vibes. The fact that he was visible after the game, according to Josh Yeo, he looked like he was walking with a little bit of a limp. That kind of tells me that it might not be that bad, because usually when it's that bad of an injury, there's a long evaluation. There's an active effort to keep the player out of the public eye. So hopefully it's not long-term or too serious. Maybe he misses in Seattle. We will see. But kind of gives me the vibe that it might not be that bad, but it would be a huge loss because he has been a model of consistency for this team in a stretch where, including last season as well, this team has just been inconsistent all the time. So having a player like that in your lineup constantly perform is a big loss if you lose him. So here's the hoping that he can get back pretty quickly.
Yeah, we'll have to see what his status is for Saturday's game against Seattle and all that. But moving on to the power play, that was the big bright spot yet again last night. The power play, the movement on that power play, Pat, leading to the goal from Michael Bunting. So crisp, so beautiful. It was fantastic to watch. The zone entry was also great. And again, they were making the Ducks move around. They were making them defend every single possible angle. And the way that Raquel and Russ were able to dish out some passes there before Bunting scored was gorgeous. And I really like how that unit is cooking right now. Heck, I like how both units are cooking right now. And I know he is not the main reason for its success. The players are part of the reason. Mike Sullivan is part of the reason for at least the power play this year. We have to say that. But David Quinn's influence on this unit has been really nice to see. You can see he's brought in some fresh new ideas for the unit, and it's worked. It's been a model of consistency in a very inconsistent Penguin season. Top 5 power play unit. It's scoring at will at this rate. And we have to give David Quinn some of his flowers because when his hiring was announced, you and I came on here, we weren't sure about it. I was pretty mixed about it. I know you were too, but I still, of course, wanted to give him a shot. And I'm happy to say, as an assistant, partly working on the power play, I think he's done a really solid job with that unit, and it continues to be a really big bright spot for this team.
25 power play goals in the last 25 games. That's nothing.
Is that good, Pat?
It's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
And I will say, it's not like they're doing anything overly innovative. They didn't totally overhaul a system. And it's more than what you and I have spoken about, where there's got to be better puck movement, there's got to be better player movement and more urgency. That all is happening. But the one thing that I have noticed is that they're putting Sidney Crosby a little bit deeper into the zone, whether it's not quite all behind the net, but it's more below the face-off dots to the goal line. That's causing opposing penalty kills to sink lower in the zone, opening up your point shots. And the reason Bunting has 9 goals on the season on the power play is because he's getting lost, because they're focusing on Crosby with possession down low or someone on the half wall, giving Bunting the ability to sneak away from the defense. You look at his goal last night. Everybody on the Ducks was fixated on Sidney Crosby low, even Brian Dumoulin, leaving Michael Bunting open on the back door. And you know that Sidney Crosby is going to be able to make that pass every single time because, yeah, Dumoulin was in the lane and he had his stick down, but Crosby's getting that pass through the majority of the time. And Bunting has the pretty much entire net to shoot into because of the puck movement. So
that wasn't Crosby on the assist. That was Rust.
And it was Rust and Crosby.
Right,
they both had, or Crosby didn't have an assist on it, but he was part of the focal point of that goal. So you look at the way they run their power play now, they're pulling opposing penalty kills down low, and it's opening up either the bumper spot in the slot or the back door. And that really has made all the difference this season.
Yeah, I mean, you saw it recently as well with Rickard Rakell goal in Buffalo. You know, that came right from the Oshie spot, and now you saw it with Bunting right at the side of the net. Gibson, no shot there because Dumoulin is playing shot there, but that pass still gets through. Bunting's like, you know what? See ya, I'll score on this 10 out of 10 times. He did exactly that. So again, really nice to see this power play continue to cook. And also, here's another stat for you, Pat. Penguins only had 40 power play goals last year. They have 39 right now with a little over 30 games left in the season. They will crush that number this year, especially with how that unit is going. So at the very least, really nice to see this unit absolutely kicking butt this year. Heck, if they had this type of power play last year, they easily make the playoffs. My friend, probably the year before that too.
One other thing I got to add as a stat, I got to give a shout out to Pittsburgh for finding this one. And it kind of shows where this team is in one of its deficiencies. And I don't want to bury this team over it, because I do think over the last couple months, they have really done a good job of pulling themselves up off of the mat and playing with a lot more urgency and a lot more heart. But here's a big, big problem for this team, in my estimation. Through 50 games this season, because last night was game number 50, they are 2-21-2 when they trail after 2 periods. Now, last night was not a game where you saw a comeback coming. That just, all of the ingredients were there for this to be a letdown. And that doesn't even start to get into how the game itself actually went. But eventually you have to be able to erase a 2-goal deficit, and you have to be able to erase that deficit after 2 periods. It's not something you can expect all the time. You don't want to go into the third period down 2 or more goals. That's a horrible place to be. But only being able to squeak out a total of essentially 6 points when that happens, you have to be able to battle back a little bit better. So when you play a team like the Ducks, I would have liked a lot more resistance in the third period, and we really didn't get that.
Right. And I know some of it is a bit hard, especially if you're getting blown out heading into the third period. But if you're down by a goal, for example, you need to find a way to come back a bit more often and at least get a point in overtime / a shootout. Obviously, winning the game is even more important, of course. But I agree. They need to find a way to get more points in those situations and not have the team, get an insurance goal, shut you down, all that good stuff. But I think that'll do it for the second segment of today's show. Coming up in the final segment, it's time to preview this game against Seattle. The second of 2 meetings against the Kraken this year. The Penguins lost the first one pretty recently, even though the Penguins outplayed the Kraken for most of the game, but they just didn't get the goaltending, and B, really weren't that great for most of the third period. But before we get to that, we got to tell you all about our final sponsor, and that is FanDuel. From the first whistle to the final drive, FanDuel makes the NFL playoffs even more exciting. Right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $300 in bonus bets if you win your first bet. That's $300 to keep the action going. The FanDuel app is very easy to navigate, and the variety of bets keeps every game exciting. Plus, when you win, you get paid instantly. No waiting around for your winnings, whether you're betting on your favorite team or just looking to add some extra excitement to the playoffs. FanDuel has you covered. Just visit FanDuel.com to join today and get started with $300 in bonus bets. That's FanDuel.com. Make the playoff season unforgettable with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. All right, we're back here on this episode of the Locked On Penguins podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Hunter Hodes, joined by my co-host, Patrick Am. So, Pat, since the Penguins lost to the Kraken have gone 2-2 in their next 4 games. They have lost to Winnipeg and Washington. Washington loss was on Thursday, but they've also beaten the Kings at home, and they also beat the Sabres at home. Joey Daccord did everything possible to try to will the Kraken to a win on Thursday, but Kraken just didn't get any offense considering how stingy the Capitals are defensively. And Daccord, that's where it starts for me with the Kraken, man. He's been fantastic this year. He's been the biggest bright spot for them, and we saw it on display really recently. He was a big reason why the Kraken won that game in Pittsburgh, making some really big, timely saves. The Penguins weren't able to get that from Tristan Jarry. Allowed that really bad early goal to Chandler Stevenson, and a bit later in the game, he also wasn't that good. I also felt like at around the 5-minute mark of the third period, after that, Penguins just kind of stopped skating, especially after the Kraken took the lead in that period. Penguins really didn't generate anything at all. They didn't really come close to mounting a comeback in that game. So, again, I liked the effort a lot in that first matchup against Seattle. I would say the first 45-ish minutes. But, again, game is 60 minutes. You got to finish off those final 15 minutes. And, of course, they got to get the better goaltending. We already talked about their high-end players a bit recently. But, again, for those that may not be aware, Matty Beniers, he's having another decent year. You got Capo Kakko on the top line. Chandler Stevenson, he's not scoring a lot of goals, but he's at least an okay playmaker. Bjorkstrand, I could see a team going after him at the deadline. You have Jared McCann, obviously, Andre Burakovsky. They got Tolvanen on their third line. Adam Larson with Vince Dunn on the top pairing. You got Brandon Montour on their second pairing. Again, there's talent here. They have an okay forward group. They just don't have some of the big guns that a lot of these other Western Conference teams have. But again, for the Penguins to really win this game, they got to do mostly what they did last time, except finish it off for the final 15 minutes, and B, get the goaltending, because again, I really liked a lot of their effort against Seattle outside of the final 15 minutes and the starting goalie.
The goaltending is the biggest thing for me. You look at that game against the Kraken, and it was a culmination for me of a theory I have had on this team for this season, especially when Tristan Jarry was the goaltender, especially the starting goaltender. And I know that he's not a bad guy. His teammates do like him. He works hard, but you could tell in that Kraken game that once they scored those 2 quick goals, were the Penguins good defensively when they happened? No, but they were saves that needed to be made. And the team's mentality and body language just switched to, well, here we go again. This guy can't make a save. This guy is not putting us in a position to win. And it deflated any and all confidence that they had. Because, like you said, for 45 minutes around that in that game, Penguins were the better team. They were the better team by a mile. But Joey Decord was making the saves he needed to make, as well as some huge saves that realistically probably should have been goals. And then you couple that with your goaltender not being able to make the basic saves. That's pretty much how that game went. So you really just have to replicate that effort. And I'm guessing it's probably going to be Blomqvist who gets the start after 2 straight for Nedeljkovic. You have to hope that Blomqvist makes the saves you need to make, because in that case, you play a similar style game, you get a couple on Decord, who I imagine they'll probably start, and you'll probably win this game. It just can't be a game where goaltending lets you down again. And with the way we've seen Blomqvist play in his limited NHL time, I have no issues saying that I think he will make those saves.
I agree, especially with the way he was also playing against Washington last weekend on the second half of back-to-back, where to me it was pretty clear that the Penguins really didn't have it going into that game. They got into Washington a bit late. They played a really emotional game against Buffalo and all that stuff. And Blomqvist, for the majority of that game, was keeping the Penguins in it. Yeah, the Capitals got the late power play goal late in the third period that really kind of derailed any attempt of trying to get a point out of that game. But I still felt like he was making a lot of really big, timely saves against one of the top teams in the league. So that gives me some confidence heading into this game against the Kraken, and especially his early season sample size where he was playing some really tough teams. The Penguins were playing even worse, but he was still making those saves. So yes, I would go to Blomqvist in this game. I understood why they went to Ned for the Ducks, considering how he had 2 really good starts in a row. But after this start, where I don't think he was bad per se against the Ducks, he just wasn't as good as he was the last 2 starts, it's only natural to go to Blomqvist for this game to see if A, he could give you a spark, and B, see if this team can get back on track, because they really need these next 3 games, and if they really want to climb the standings and get closer to that second wild card spot, because you're 2-2 on this road trip right now. Best case now, you're looking at 5-2 on this road trip, which would be a success. Don't get me wrong. If you win these next 3, 5-2 on a 7-game road trip, pretty good success considering how they've played on the road this year. But again, you got to take this one game at a time. Do you have anything else to add about this game against Seattle before we wrap up?
I mean, the main thing for me going into this game is throw out the stats, throw out the history, throw out all that. You got beaten by a team you shouldn't have been beaten by on your home ice with a good effort. So you have to have a little bit of motivation going into this one to kind of get some revenge. And I'll add this kind of on top of what you said. It has to be from here on out a 1-game mentality for this team. You can't look ahead. You can't worry about, and I know it's human nature. Some players will, some players won't. You can't worry about the trade deadline. You can't worry about who's going to be here, who isn't going to be here. Play the game in front of you, play a full 60, start stacking points again, and see where this all shakes out. Because I think we all know that this team is likely to be a seller no matter what happens. And at the end of the day, I've said this a bunch. I said it last season a bunch. A lot of guys are playing for the future. A lot of guys are playing for jobs, whether it's here, whether it's elsewhere, whether it's guys saying, I want to be part of the solution here in Pittsburgh, so I'm going to prove my worth, or guys saying that I want to go play for a contender in the next couple of seasons, so I need to prove to those contenders that I'm worth a contract or I'm worth giving up assets to acquire.
Yep. I completely agree on that.
There is also one other thing I
Go ahead.
forgot about, Hunter, before we go. There may be something people notice when we return on Monday about you and where you're recording the show from. Would you like to share with our audience, especially the YouTube audience, what they're going to see on Monday?
Yeah, so this room is not packed up yet. I'm waiting until we finish recording this, which will be in the next probably 30 to 60 seconds. But I will be in my new house starting tomorrow on Saturday. My girlfriend and I closed on a house a few weeks ago. We are moving into that new place tomorrow. And I will be in my new office on Monday. Kind of similar background. I'll have my nice bookshelves. I'll have my little bobbleheads, all my little pictures and all that. Some of them might look a little different. I might be moving some stuff around, but for all intents and purposes, it's going to be a fairly similar setup come Monday. It's just be in a different house, which I am pretty excited about. This time I now own a house, considering, well, I was renting for quite a bit, but yeah, I'm pretty excited about it, man.
Yeah, I wanted to give you that shout out, give you your flowers for that. It's awesome news. So looking forward to seeing you in the quote unquote new studio.
Hey, I appreciate it. I will just say this, moving sucks. I know a lot of people that are listening to / watching this have probably done it many times. It is terrible how much work goes into it. But hey, yes, I will be in my brand new office on Monday. Super excited about it, especially in a place that I will officially own again and not rent. But again, that will do it for today's episode. We'll also hopefully have Jesse Marshall on for Marshall Monday this coming Monday. But thank you all so much for tuning in. Pat and I both really appreciate it. We'll talk to you all on Monday.